Have you ever wondered what it's actually like to walk in someone else's shoes? Well, today we're going to dive into a research method that does just that by getting right into the personal side of human experience. I want to start with a quote from a woman named Martha. She was in a study about living with chronic pain, and she said this: "It's not who I am, it's me, but it is me doing it, but not me." Kind of confusing, right? How can something be me and not me all at once? It's like a riddle, and it's one we're going to solve together today. You see, Martha's words get at this huge challenge for researchers. How do you possibly get past the symptoms and the numbers to understand what it feels like to live with something like chronic pain, day in and day out? How do you really get inside someone's personal world? What Martha's talking about here is really a puzzle of identity. It's complicated, it's emotional, and it's full of contradictions. And a simple survey asking you to rate your pain from 1 to 10, that is just not going to cut it. It's not going to capture any of that nuance. So, to unlock these kinds of really deep, personal stories, you need a different approach. You need a method that's built for the job, a special kind of toolkit for making sense of how people make sense of their own lives. And that toolkit has a name. It's called Interpretative Phenomenological Analysis, or, IPA for short. And it's an approach that's pretty much perfectly designed to untangle puzzles exactly like the one Martha just gave us. So at its heart, IPA is all about one thing: meaning. It's not trying to find some objective, factual truth about what happened. Nope. It is 100% dedicated to exploring how an individual sees things, their own unique story about their own world. And this leads us to a really core concept in IPA, which is basically a two-step interpretation. First, you have the participant, right? Someone like Martha. She's trying to make sense of her own experience. Then the researcher comes along and tries to make sense of her sense-making. So it's an interpretation of an interpretation. And that's how you get to the heart of the matter. Okay, so how does a researcher actually get started with an IPA study? How do you gather the clues you need to solve these puzzles of experience? Let's get into the practical side of things for a second. The first thing you've got to understand is that IPA is not about surveying thousands of people to make these big, sweeping generalizations. The goal is the total opposite. It's all about a deep dive into the lives of a very small, very carefully chosen group of people to get a super rich and detailed understanding. So, just how small are we talking? Well, for a student project, for someone using IPA for the first time, the recommended sample size is often just 3. That's it, 3 people. And you might be wondering, why so few? It's because that small number lets the researcher really get into each individual story, and then do this painstaking, detailed comparison to see what's similar and what's different. Now, the main tool for gathering these stories is something called the semi-structured interview. Think about a structured interview. That's like a rigid script, right? The questions are set in stone. But a semi-structured interview is way more like a guided conversation. The researcher has a list of topics they want to cover, sure, but they can follow the participant's lead, ask more questions about interesting things that come up, and build the kind of trust you need to get that really rich, detailed story. All right, so you've done your interviews. You've transcribed them word for word. Now you've got pages and pages of text. And this is where the really fascinating part begins: decoding that transcript to find the meaning hidden inside. So let's go back to our central mystery, okay? We're going to use Martha's own words as our case file. We're going to see exactly how a researcher would work with her transcript to figure out what in the world she meant by that puzzling statement. Now, this analysis isn't just random guesswork. There's a real system to it, usually a 4-step process. You start by just reading and rereading the text, making little notes in the margins. Then you start turning those notes into more abstract ideas or emergent themes. After that, you look for connections, you start grouping similar themes together. And finally, you build this structure table of what are called superordinate themes. Those are the big, overarching ideas that tie it all together. And this slide is a perfect example of how that works. Take a look at the middle column. That's Martha's actual quote. Now look to the left. You see the researcher's immediate raw thoughts: conflict, tension, fear of being known. Then on the right, those notes get refined into more analytical themes, like conflict of selves or struggle to accept new self. You can literally watch the meaning start to bubble up from the text. So after all that careful, iterative work, what's the payoff? I mean, this whole process of coding and clustering, it's not just some academic exercise. It leads to a genuine aha moment, a profound insight that unlocks the entire puzzle. So as the researcher was working through Martha's transcript, grouping all these smaller themes about conflict and shame and identity, one powerful unifying idea started to surface, a superordinate theme that just captured the very essence of her struggle. And that theme was this: living with an unwanted self. The analysis showed that Martha's experience with chronic pain had basically created a new version of herself, one she described as mean and hateful. And this was a self she didn't recognize, a self she didn't like, and one she was desperately trying to separate from what she felt was her real identity as a nice person. Okay, now let's go back to her original statement. It's not who I am. That's her defending her original self. It is me doing it. That's her acknowledging that, yep, this new mean behavior is coming from her, but not me. And that's the final rejection of this new unwanted identity. Suddenly, it all makes sense. The riddle is solved. It's this incredibly profound statement about a fractured sense of self. And this is why a method like IPA matters so much. It gives a voice to experiences that are just too complex for a spreadsheet. It shows us the personal meaning behind big life events and gives us a true insider's perspective that you just can't get from quantitative data. It helps us understand the why and the how of being human, not just the what. And that's absolutely crucial for everything from improving healthcare to just being more empathetic. This whole process of deep listening and careful interpretation really challenges us to look beyond the surface. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Beyond the headlines and the statistics, what other complex, deeply human stories are all around us, just waiting for someone to take the time to truly understand them?